We should, while you're in this hot seat, we should really talk a little bit about Butta babies.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we have, you know, in Toronto, we knew as soon as Motion jumped on the track, we knew this is proper things. We need to listen. So how did, before you talk about that, who were the Butta babies? How did you guys get started, and what's, you know,
all right, where does it go back? Where do you want to start? I mean, Manchilde, originally from Trinidad, then moved and was living in Toronto for a while.
Yeah.
He was a part of a group back then, UBiz, and they'd put out some stuff. Or, you know, these are early days of hip hop where it was very rare. You had Maestro, you had Dream Warriors, but there wasn't much else besides that.
True.
Right? And you guys were talking about it before. The Master Plan show was going on, and Manchilde brought his stuff and met Motion.
Okay.
And boom. And actually, now, Motion and me are like, that's my sister.
Yeah.
Like, she's my big sis. She's I'm the father of her. I'm the godfather of her son, and like we still cool. So I got to shout out my girl Motion. But we then did this collective thing. I got to shout out Nth Degree Anthony Bansfield.
Yeah.
We did a collective called the griots, the underground griots of basically a Canada-wide poetry album, but we had some, you know, some rhythms and stuff behind that, and you know, from there we started, myself and Manchilde started doing tracks. I was on another group before called Death Threat, and then, you know, that went a different way, and then bam, me and Manchilde used to hook up, and actually it's really born out of this studio because we did Ill Groove Garden first before we had Butta babies in a certain ways. We had my boy D Hybrid. We used to go to the basement. We used to make music and all the rest of that. And, you know, we just loved music. So every Friday we'd come to, it was, you know, D Hybrid's basement. And, you know, his mom would turn down that music. But we'd be down there. We'd be listening to all the new stuff. And then we said, yo, why don't we start making our own stuff?
Yeah.
So, boom. We just started creating, and it was on from there. So we had also DJ Raid, who also was a part of the group. He was our DJ for a while, so I got to big him up. And of course, a lot of it too was also pushed because we were, you know, making the music. Manchilde was rapping, ourselves was making beats, and Hype Man and DJ Raid was making beats. But we also took on the management of it, and we literally took it like a study. Like, we would go to chapters back then, and each other month we would buy a book and about the industry, and it would rotate in the crew. So each person would have the book for like 2 or 3 weeks, and we'd have literally meetings about, you know,
amazing,
what we're gonna do on a strategy wise.
Yeah.
And then we would also get into practice, and then practice what we're actually some music and the rest of that.
How cool is that?
That's next level.
Well, I mean, that's what it was. I mean, most crews in a certain way were trying to do that back in the day. There weren't many major signed people. You didn't have a whole industry or a team behind you. You were, and we had a, if you want to call him, manager and photographer, Mark Biter, my boy Bides, gotta big him up, you know, who helped out in the process. We did have some other, you know, people trying to manage at different point, but we really handled our own stuff because, you know, we know it best, we love it best, and so we know how to, you know, get to where we're going, where we want to go. And we had different strategies based on studying different people. We would get together and, oh yeah, you know, you see this, you see the cover of this album, and, you know, even thinking about our album covers and all the rest of that. How are we going to put together our product? We literally used to study that together. So.
But I got to rate you guys because sometimes in these crews, they don't pass the books around. They'd be like, one person will get the book and everyone else will ask that person every question that's in the book rather than read the book themselves.
Oh, yeah,
you know what I mean? So
I remember times when, like, okay,
together.
I got to do my homework, man. Child's going to call me on some shit.
Yeah.
So let me get through this chapter before we...
That's amazing. That is amazing.
So,
That's philosophy is do it yourself. You know what I mean?
That's the height of it. DIY.
Yeah. Nobody was coming to offer some massive contract. It's like, we got to figure out how to do this ourselves. And, you know, and the station's part of it.
Yeah. So we had strategies with, and it's funny, you were a part of it too. We used to do what we call a radio tour. So if we're like, okay, we got a new track, let's do a radio tour. So you had Masters at Work, you had We Funk, you had Weekend Groove, you had Positive Vibes, all the different radio shows, we would try to go there. And again, we also would roll as a crew. Manchilde's trying to call in just now, actually. We want to try to hook him in.
Yeah.
Here, you want to talk to him? Manchilde, what's good?
What's good? What's good, folks? What's good, Montreal? What's good, CKUT? What's good, Radio McGill? What's happening?
We here, man. We here, man. You
Manchilde.
traveling back to Philly?
Yeah, I'm on the road, man. Just crossed the border and
Phew, Trump let you back in?
yeah, he did. Yeah. I was wondering for a second there, but I'm here. I'm on the other side, though.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
What's good? All right.
Big ups, Manchilde.
So yeah, Manchilde, we were just kind of talking now about Butta Babies coming to be again. You know, that Toronto connection and emotion, and you got Nth Degree. I mean,
Sure.
anything you want to say about those times that? And I remember that transition from you from the Toronto hip hop scene. You were doing your stuff, then to the Montreal hip hop scene, and would it be the radio show, Butta Babies, and you know, even a freestyle things down at Metropolis.
Absolutely. So my genesis in Canada as a hip hop artist is with the band Upward Bound to the Innocent Hubris, which was my first sort of iteration of it, and that was the first person to ever play a track of mine on air. Was Motion at the Masters at Work show.
Yes.
No, Master Plan.
Master Plan show. So the two of them used to be back and forth. Master Plan show on
CIUT FM. CIUT.
Yeah, exactly, on CIUT, and that was quite the experience. It was quite the moment. I remember quivering in my boots with my demo tape in my hand. This is 30 years ago by now. And so Motion was the first person to ever play my stuff. And if you want to talk about Nth Degree and Word Life and that project, I mean, Anthony was one of the cast to literally pull me out of the house and get me on the road and actually begin to give me a platform in Butta Babies, a platform to sort of slightly pre-Butta Babies with the Word Life project. And so a lot of these things are part of the culmination of Butta Babies that led us to ultimately and again, pre-Butta Babies was getting a radio show on CKUT Ilgrove Garden, which is still running since 1997 or 98, something to that effect. So, all of these folks and these outlets are like institutions to us. And so I'm so radically grateful, of course.
So how would you, Manchilde, how would you assess the role that CKUT has played here in Montreal? Because in Toronto, we had CKLN, we also had CHRY and CIUT. What role would you say CKUT played?
Indispensable, invaluable, cannot be calculated, not in the least. I remember the movement in Toronto to get a radio station because there were no radio stations, and I remember the whole moment and the early Flow 93.5 moment. All of that is all well and good, but because of the situation in Montreal where there was absolutely no urban radio, commercial urban radio for black folks, CKUT played all of those roles, and there wasn't 3 different stations because Concordia only had an internal station. It was literally just CKUT, Radio McGill, and so that shouldered the burden that CHRY, CIUT, and CKLN did in Toronto. That was all done just by CKUT, not least of which was the reality of the Anglophone situation in Quebec and the role that CKUT provided for that. I mean, without a CKUT, there would not be a Butta Babies, there would not be a Manchilde, there would not be, you just name the group that has come out of the hip-hop scene or the spoken word scene, or it literally would not exist without CKUT. And in that respect, CKUT has absolutely been pioneering and productively institutional.
Yeah, I mean, literally getting your song played on Masters at Work or Sound Supreme show back in the day, that was the first goal. Right. If you could get your stuff there and get it played or Master Plan in Toronto, that was the goal. Right. So even now I have people who I've worked, I see on a come up, Borden, all these other dudes, and they're telling us, one of the first spots that played our record was Ilgrove Garden. And
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
we've
Which is
always
why
welcomed young people just putting out stuff. Just email me your tracks. Come through. Come to the radio show. Chop it up. And
just want to say one more time though, where CHRY, CIUT, and CKLN held it down for Toronto, and then Toronto eventually got an urban station for a while, and then it was eventually bought back, and all sorts of different things. To this day, if I'm correct, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I've been gone since 2008. CKUT continues to provide that outlet on its own for the urban black masses, particularly the Anglophone, not limited to the Anglophone population, of course, but really hold it down in ways that, even the folks in Toronto have had some help with at points.
I can tell you this. Because I've followed that whole drive to get an urban station. And I knew some of the folks personally.
Right.
I think the embrace of hip hop wasn't there.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yep.
I think the brand of urban radio was not dissimilar to stations in the U.S. that avoided rap music until late night.
yeah.
Right. So very late. Exactly. That even Hot 97 broke in on and intervened on eventually. It was, I just read a really wonderful article recently that quoted Mark Campbell, who I think will be on this radio show at some point if he's not on this.
That's me right
now.
there.
Mark's
That's him right here.
Right. Hail up the man still, scholar to scholar. Hail
All
up
right.
the man still, because I'm seeing the work.
Scholar to scholar.
Yeah, man. The
I
doctors.
saw you quoted in a magazine by someone named Francesca, who really beautifully laid out the politics of the moment and what was at stake and the ways in which the term urban was coded as black and so treated, denigrated, even in a context in Canada that was supposed to be racially, or we didn't. The idea was, the discourse was, we don't have the problems that they have in the U.S. When in fact the same type of racial coding was happening in the Canadian space as well. And I was just reading that article as I work on a book currently myself, and I saw your name mentioned, and of course Pat Dillon mentioned that I should be reading it. Here I am reading this article. There's Mark Campbell all over it, mentioning motion, mentioning so many of the folks that were involved in that moment. And I, just looking back on it here briefly, we were artists back then, and it was really interesting to sort of approach it from the perspective of an artist and to really feel that movement. And also for an artist such as myself, who was both in the Toronto scene and the Montreal scene, as part of the emerging then Canadian scene. I leave the floor with that.
And here I am sitting at CKUT.
Right.
Y'all telling me that Butter Babies don't exist without CKUT. You know what?
No.
I mean, you could read the article or you could come to CKUT.
Yes.
Just saying. Yeah, so glad we got you on the line here. Yeah, we're chopping it up.
I was, when I switched from not switched, as I transitioned into scholarship, I had always imagined somebody had needed to document that moment.
Yeah.
And I had never really read anything about that until that moment. I literally just a week and a half ago, I read this article, and it so beautifully captured the politics, the dynamics, the dramaturgy of the moment, what was at stake, and so vividly that it just drew me back into the moment. And I'm so happy to see that we in Canada have engaged beyond the music, and I'm not saying beyond as though there's any limits to the music, but I've also engaged in documenting it, writing about it, thinking about it critically, and really taking that time to reflect in ways that sometimes only scholars can. And I'm not trying to be divisive here, but there are kinds of ways in which scholars encode and rethink and critically engage in ways that the music does, maybe more amorphously, but that scholars tend to want to do really didactically.
Mark?
Bam.
Wow.
The floor is yours.
The floor is mine. No, not really. The floor is all of ours. I mean, there's so many people in the house. I'm not taking up space like that. But now that we have two of the Butter Babies here, I mean, now I got a question for both of y'all. And this is a difficult one, but it's important for the rest of Canada to understand.
Okay.
All right. Now, you guys clearly came up in a moment where consciousness, knowledge of self, that's all part of what you're watching and listening to, right? 88, 89, before
Native tongue era.
in many ways. And definitely before 94. But what was it like to be an Anglophone hip hop group in Montreal and try to get exposure in this province as an Anglophone hip hop group when hip hop in the early 90s is still kind of like, you know, even Sony Music and those people are like, oh, we don't know if we should invest in that stuff just yet, you know, until they get Nas. But what is it like over here? Because the reason why I asked this question is because I know and I've been told many times that K Tronada does not get any press in this province because so many of his songs are, well, he's quote unquote an Anglophone artist, but his music is, you know, what was it like in the early 90s to try to get out of this city and get shine?
Well, I think Montreal has, and even then had almost two separate hip hop, crowds. The French, you had the Haitian French side, and you had the English. And again, and it was also geographically the East and the West. They did do some shows together, but often there wasn't that much crossing. And I remember as Butter Babies, even, Manchilde, I was talking before about sitting down and strategizing. We almost had a theory of let's try to get to Montreal through Toronto and through Philadelphia. Yeah, like you want to talk about those days where we said, okay, people will respect us more if they hear about us. And I remember, coming back to Montreal after going to, we did a show out in Vancouver, and then we hosted Rap City. And then, people in Montreal would see us in a different way than as compared if we did Music Plus here. Right.
That's very insightful.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. So I would be lying if I could say I fully understand that because I came to Montreal in '92. When I saw ZipLoks already on television with Death Threat.
Well, there you go too.
Right, and so the exposure was really tiny, but also sporadic. There were moments, there were openings. Shaheen was on television at one point. Music Plus was doing some work at some point. To sort of give life. I was able to, as an artist arriving from Montreal to Toronto, be able to hone in and zero in on a scene that I was able to actually see on television before I was actually able to meet. I actually saw Zip on television well before I actually met him. But it was very, very sporadic. When you ask the question about, and Zip, when you bring up that idea about how to try to make it to Montreal through Toronto, I think there are two routes out of Montreal. One of them was to try to do New York. And so there's that movement of some of the early radio, Butcher, these folks going down to New York, picking up records, because we're actually closer to New York than Toronto. Right? I'm actually on the thoroughfare right now to New York. And so that was a little bit closer for us than Toronto. Closer for us to do than it is for Toronto. But then Toronto was also the other angle. And then part of being an Anglophone artist for myself, coming to Montreal, I came with no expectations of what Montreal could or Quebec could or couldn't do for me. I knew that I was arriving in a space, arriving from Toronto that was already not Anglophone, that was already very Francophone. And so I was prepared to take any other avenues. Also because of the fact that I had experience in Toronto prior to that. I had known Motion and met a few different people, done Monster Jam, opened for Farside Blackwood, a few things. Before I got to Montreal, I was really eager to use the Toronto route. Institutions like North by Northwest, North by Northeast, and CMW
the conferences
were helpful later on. But in that early period, Marcus, you asked about that, 89, 88. I came to Canada from Trinidad in 89, the year of De La Soul and the year of Soul to Soul. For me, I cannot pretend to know what it was like to come out of Montreal pre-1992.
Well, I think one of the biggest things, too, that kind of affected the climate here was Dubmatic, who was a group they blew up. And I was like, how are these dudes selling this much records? And touring and selling out. And we was like, can we, because they were French, right? And, how can we tap in? And can we tap into that? Are those people who, and again, for Quebecers who are liking this new hip hop thing, this is somebody spitting in a language they can understand, talking about the things that they were dealing with. They blew up.
Yeah.
But, I don't think anybody, probably the most selling hip hop record in Quebec have probably been them.
Okay.
I didn't find the Quebec scene to be necessarily exclusive, right? In the ways in which I interacted with it, in the ways in which I was able to interface with it. To me, those folks that were interested in hip hop, really interested in hip hop, were always interested in English hip hop. I think the Haitian Haitian community in particular was a go-between. The Haitian community also had strong roots in Brooklyn, roots in Miami and spaces like that. And they were doing a lot of translation work between the scene for us. I was able to do tracks with Buzayan, another group. Talk about Dubmatic. Buzayan was also a cultural. Dubmatic blew up. But Buzayan was the
culture
band.
Yeah, they were the culture.
The Haitian band that blew up. And you can't talk about Black Montreal without talking about
them.
The juggernaut internally that is the Haitian community and that particular set of struggles and dynamics that the Haitian community channels in the space. And those were always my cousins, man. As far as I'm concerned, my cousins. I remember the Haitian folks telling me, "How come you pretend you ain't Haitian?" I'm like, "Wow, if only I was." I take that as a compliment. And so for us, because the Haitian community was also so interested in that bilingual aspect, they wanted to connect with the U.S. They already had these migrational connections to the U.S. already.
Yeah,
working with Haitian community, working with Haitian artists was beautiful, was enriching. I can't describe it as my people to this day. I still think about it. Very fondly. Those moments.
I have a question along this line for Mike Mission and for Il Groove Garden too.
Yeah.
What happens in your mix show, like if you mix Anglophone and Francophone, like Les Architectes and other folks, and what happens when you get them in the mix? Do you get calls? And
that's
people
a very
like,
good question. And we play a lot of we play French and hip hop. I mean French and English hip hop, mostly English, but I mean we play French hip hop too as well. We've been doing that lately, and we get calls on it.
Yeah,
we get calls from people liking the music.
Liking the music. Okay. So there's an openness there.
We support that too.
Well, it's interesting. We interviewed Michael Williams on Friday on Butcher T's show.
Yeah,
and I remember asking him, about whether there were really two solitudes in terms of the music. Anglo Montrealers and French speaking folks, and his view, and I'm not saying it's the only view out there, but his view was that the French were always checking out what was going on with the Anglophones.
Yes, of course.
And they were up on the music. They were up on the fashion. They were in the same stores. So there were people that were crossing over.
Well, in a certain way, it is kind of the same market. And just as we were the English people in Montreal trying to figure out, okay, how can we expose ourselves to the French people that have gone and supported Dubmatic, how can we get a piece of that pie? The French and Francophones who were putting out music were also thinking like, again, Quebec is a smaller piece of pie than the rest of the world. Most music, hip hop that was coming out was English, right? And especially this is in the early times, there wasn't as much French. Like I know even France had at one point a big blow up, and they had a lot of French artists come out. That was, just like, England had its own, sound and come out at some point in time. So everybody tried to grab as big of a piece of the pie as they can. And of course, the French would want to have, we'd have, Francophone artists come to our show and be like, listen, do I have to have an English song to play? And I said, nah, man, you can just play whatever music, man. And they would come down, do an interview in English, and then throw on a French track. Right.
Let me jump in real quick.
Go.
Les Architectes.
Yes.
In thinking about continental African hip hop, but in the Parisian context, right? So Akhenaton or North African Akhenaton, I Am, and I know Ray and those guys booked a lot of those acts and brought them over. I find that as I do a lot of world traveling and I think about Quebec, I'm not only thinking about just the internal French, but I'm thinking about in ways some of the communities, French hip hop communities also wanted to connect with Paris, what was happening with Black Paris, what was happening with North African Paris as well. Again, at the end of the day, whatever we say about the poverty or the impoverishment of the Anglophone community or what we experienced there, we were still the culture brokers.
Yes.
If you wanted to get with the hip hop, you needed to understand what the flex was. You needed to understand the wordplay. You needed to understand the cultural aesthetics. And that could only happen through the context of English in a certain way because the Mecca is still the Bronx to some degree.
Yes,
right.
to the degree that we were West Indians, just like a lot of the folks in the Bronx were who invented the thing, work, et cetera,
Yeah.
we channeled a lot of that. And so they knew it. And then again, I'm going to say it one more time before I got to go, and I got to go right now. The Haitian community was key in that. I remember when the Fugees blew up.
Yes.
That was a cultural revolution among Haitians as well, and
Yeah.
another set of Haitian community that were also translating the immigrant experience, the Creole experience, and
Yeah.
also the Anglophone experience. And so, to the degree that, at least for me, we're operating with Butta Babies, but also moving in and between and through and mixing and mingling with folks from the Haitian community, I never felt left out. I knew that the people were looking at us. Perhaps we weren't getting the deals that a Dub Matique might get, per se, but it was still radically enriching, and I got to run with that, folks.
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you, Manchilde, for coming through. I know you're on the run. You got to get back on the run. Big up the wifey and kids and all the rest of that.
Likewise.
And
Think of all the people in the studio.
Big ups, Manchilde.
Manchilde.
Foundation.
Yeah, Manchilde.
Thank you so much, man. This has been a very enriching conversations with all of you guys here. I feel like I'm a lot more knowledgeable.
One of my favorite joints I want to say from you guys, man, was Understand Yourself, man.
Ooh,
That's a classic for
Understand
Faith, brother.
Yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
That's one of them.
Yeah.
You want to drop that right
But
now?
well,
Yeah, hey, listen, man. If you got
Understand
it,
yourself.
drop it.
that song is, man. Whew. Oh,
If you
man.
got it, drop it, man. Yeah, man. Classic stuff. I got to
We
say,
rock
I've been
that. We
thankful.
still rock that.
I've worked with a lot of different artists, and it's so funny because everybody's like, okay, what's your top 5 MCs? Manchilde is in mine. I'm sorry, straight up. Manchilde is in my top 5. Because, like, even the lyrics he spit, I can completely relate to because it's, and takes things to a whole different level. But you want to jump into it?
I feel like you should introduce this.
Well, this,
super
okay,
special.
now we're going to get to Man in Motion.
Oh, sorry. What was the joint? Did I get it wrong?
No, that's all right. He was talking Understand Yourself.
Okay, let me get that.
We can get that one too.
Sorry,
but to
this one was
Understand
queued up already.
Yourself, actually, Understand Yourself was the first video we shot, and I got to pick up new films back in the day. And Factor, I think Factor was a huge thing when it comes to Canadian hip hop music. They were giving us a lot of love, Cardi and Choclair and all Rascals. I just saw them the other week actually, and a lot of that whole generation of music makers from Canada got a big push when it comes to being able to, again, back in the day, there wasn't a Spotify, but it was Much Music. People would tune into Much Music, and that's where you would hear tracks and then maybe go to the record store and try to buy it. So the fact that they even put that stuff out and gave us, again, this is a Canadian organization that gives out money so people can record music videos at an affordable price. That's not, because it's a lot of money to do these things.
Yes.
And it also, what it does is it created a whole industry of people, and I know some young brothers and sisters got into it too, and whether it be from that money trickles down to all the different parts and pieces. So yeah, Understand Yourself, our first video.
Wicked.
Keep it locked to 90.3 FM.
Yeah.